This is Dr. John Brimhall, and we're here at a webinar this evening as a precursor to homecoming. Dr. Michael Kessler is with us tonight, who is multi-talented, and at homecoming we'll have his wife, who's also a DC, and another physician with him that he'll introduce in a few minutes. Let me just kind of whet your scan a little bit for what's going on. This year we've had some exciting new people on the program. Dr. Childs, who's a doctor of osteopathy, who's introducing us to many different aspects that only medical doctors can talk about, but giving us insights how to work together with them. Dr. Childs is actually working with Dr. Ware in his office, and they have launched the peripheral neuropathy course. And in this course in peripheral neuropathy, as many of you know, one of our doctors, Brimhall Certified, introduced us to that just 3 months ago. The first month he used it, he did $87,000 in extra services collected. The next month he did $120,000 in extra services collected. And he continues to go forward, and he's been coaching Dr. Brett and Dr. Childs and how he's doing peripheral neuropathy. And one thing that we really need to be able to do is to measure. Measure is very important, and that's what Dr. Kessler is going to talk to us tonight about the Angio scan. Most of the ability to measure circulation, the instruments start at $5,000 and up from there, but the Angio scan is only $1,500. Unbelievable. And we can measure people, and we show we increase their circulation through the peripheral neuropathy course, through the Beamer, especially through the OHS nutrition, through specific exercise. So to be able to measure and improve what we're doing is going to give us a whole new aspect. I think you'll get excited about that. So Dr. Kessler wrote the puzzle piece today. If you didn't read it, go back and read it today. This will be available to you, this webinar. You're going to want to listen to it again. We'll make sure you signed up for the webinar. We'll be getting it most likely tomorrow. We'll send it out to our entire 20,000 on our email list next Monday night. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to Dr. Kessler and turn him loose. I know you'll be here to the very end and be looking forward to seeing him, his wife and associates at homecoming. So you can schedule Thursday night ahead of time. We're going to have the workshop. We have about 8 different physicians who are going to be treating that night, and he's going to be there with his team doing all the different things that we're talking about. Dr. Mike, take it over.
All right, fantastic. Before I get started, I really want to thank Dr. Brimhall for bringing us on board. And really, I want to thank Thrive. I want to thank Clark Tilley because he's put this all together today. And obviously, the great products from OHS with the grant, which we're going to be using and showing you how to use this in a complete kind of turnkey system where we're able to really measure the angio scan to check your the cardiovascular status of your patients. But we also put together exactly how you can change these scores and improve the cardiovascular status of your patients using the OHS products. And we also we have a website that we'll show you at the end of this where you can get on, and we developed a quick start guide for you, flyers that you can use with your patients. So it's really kind of a turnkey situation. It's very easy to use, very easy for the patient to read to see the results, and for you to go over that with the patient. It only takes about 5 minutes, and you got your cardiovascular status. So with this information, you can make decisions immediately on your nutritional recommendations as well as stress reduction, because this machine also has a little bit of heart rate variability in it, and it will show you when the patients are in need of some stress reduction. Angio scan evaluation should be done monthly to gauge dosage and strategy. So you test somebody, and what happens is, they come back in a month, and maybe they're just a little bit better. That's going to tell you that you really need to increase the dosage on the optimal fruit and veggie plus, and maybe the optimal optic nitric. So you probably, so you're going to be able to see that visually and what you need to do. And as far as I'm concerned, when we have a plan and we have less stress and confusion in our practice, I just tell you a little bit, and we all practice differently. The way I practice in my clinic is I have one table. I have my heart rate variability, the HeartQuest. I have the Angio scan. I have another technology that measures heavy metals. I have all my test kits for muscle testing. I have everything right there. I don't move. And, I visited some of the offices out there, and, a lot of the doctors, they're moving, they're running around. I'm getting older, and I want ease in my life. And the technologies that we're going to be sharing with you over the next, hopefully, couple of years, including this one, are designed to help you screen for important aspects of your patient's health and save and conserve your own energy. You know, big deal. I used to have a cardiovascular health day or a heart day, and I used to bring in like a phlebotomist to draw blood, and I'd run fraction lipids and homocysteine and HCRP and more, a variety of tests, and use my angio scan. And so I'm just giving you some ideas. You might want to take a certain day out of every month and do a cardiovascular screening. But the point being, with this technology that I'm going to share with you, it saves lives. It's really important to have this in your practice. So let me just go to the next screen. Okay. So it says, unless you look, how do you know if you're at risk? So you got Bugs Bunny here, and he's looking at Sylvester the cat, and he's looking inside him, and he says, I think I see your problem. And he's got Sylvester in here. And what we're going to say to our patients, I think I see your problem. Oh, your vascular stiffness. Oh, your vascular stiffness is saying that your vessels are really starting to become less flexible, and you're actually way over what you should be for somebody your age. It's telling us that. We're going to be looking at the pulse curve type. The pulse curve type we're going to go into, but we certainly don't want this A pattern, because an A wave is typical for subjects older than 60 years. In persons younger than 60 years, A-type wave may suggest increased arterial stiffness. So we don't want to have stiff arteries, right? Because that leads to cardiovascular problems like MI and strokes. And the vascular aging. This person's 64 years old. They're small and medium-sized vessels, and they're 60 years old. So they're older than they should be. Their vessels are older than they should be, and that's not a good thing. So our patients deserve to know the status of their cardiovascular health long before it becomes a major problem. Excuse me. It takes a long time for mainstream medicine to catch up with current research and science and implement the newest information that can influence the health of the population. And the angioscan is one of those technologies. I mean, it takes a long time before something really good is brought out to the public. For example, homocysteine. It took 20 years for homocysteine to become a regular panel that we could run. And thousands of people probably died before they got that out there. This is one of those technologies that you need to use on every patient. So we're going to go over the solutions to correct what you find on the angioscan in just a bit. But I want to talk about my team. This is my team. I'm Dr. Mike Kessler, and I've been practicing chiropractic and functional medicine for about 35 years. And now I'm teaching with Dr. Karamoff and Dr. Bicchetti all over the world, and we're sharing these new technologies that Dr. Karamoff brought to us. Years ago, I met Dr. Karamoff at a conference, and he brought to me the HeartQuest and the AngioScan, and I said, man, these are such great technologies, and we really need to bring them to this country. So we've been tweaking them and improving them, and today, after one more thing, also, Dr. Karamoff was an MD from Russia, and he also ran a hyperbaric oxygen chamber there and did anesthesiology. He also came here and went to Portland, Oregon, and got his NMD in naturopathic medicine. And he's also trained in Chinese and Ayurvedic medicine. So he's very eclectic, you might say. And at the end of this conference today, let's ask him whatever questions you want to ask him about the angioscan. And this company would not be able to work and to thrive without Dr. Sandra Bicchetti, who's a DC, also trained by Dr. Amaro in Arizona. I think Dr. Brimhall was also trained by him, and she pretty much runs the company. And with that said, what's the leading cause of death? We kind of all know that, and it's cardiovascular disease. And I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of statistics because we all know it's bad, but one of the ones that I want to tell you about is heart disease doesn't just kill the elderly. It is the leading cause of death for all Americans aged 35 and older. And 16% of cardiovascular deaths occur in individuals 35 to 64 years old. So when should we start screening? Well, I think we should start screening the teenagers, because it takes 20 to 30 years down the road here when we start to get endothelial damage and damage our vessels, where we end up with a major problem as far as a stroke or heart attack. And so we want to start to start to screen as early as we can. Teenagers would be a good time. So here's the parameters that we're going to measure. We're going to measure something called the pulse wave times. Remember, A is not so good, and we want to have more of a percentage of B and C when we start to look at this. And we'll show you what that means. We can measure heart rate, vascular stiffness, which tells us about the large arteries, vascular age, which is going to tell us about the small and medium vessels, the stress index, which is kind of like heart rate variability, excuse me, and we're going to measure oxygen saturation. So the technique that we use is called photoplasmogram. It's photoplasmography, and is the technology that uses a finger probe similar to a pulse oximeter and shines visible red and infrared light into the fingertip. This can indicate the volume of blood passing in or out of the artery. And with this technology, we are measuring a pulse wave the heart produces when the left ventricle contracts during systole. And the speed at which the pulse travels along the arterial tree is directly related to arterial stiffness. We'll talk more about that. So where did all this stuff come from? Well, there's an interesting history of pulse wave analysis. It started with Friedrich Akbar Mohammed somewhere in the 1800s. This was one hell of a Renaissance guy. He fenced, he boxed, he was in medical school and got all sorts of awards. And even to this day, what we know about hypertension and the involvement with the kidneys came from Friedrich Akbar Mohammed. And he invented this technology to measure the vessels. And this is a little tonometer that goes on the radial artery. And we are able to produce a visible pulse wave that we can visually see, like you see here on this paper. And it was pretty incredible because after he looked at these for a long period of time, he was able to look at the pattern and pretty much tell what kind of disease that person had. So these pulse waves were pathognomonic of very specific disease patterns. It was incredible. So unfortunately for poor Mohammed, the disappearance of pulse wave forms in medicine just went away because in 1860, with the discovery of the stethoscope, in 1905, the description of the Karakoff sounds and the first measurement of blood pressure with the sphygmomanometer, and what happened was this shaped the way we did medicine today. So we opted out for simplicity over accuracy. And this is now coming back. It's kind of interesting now that pulse wave analysis is starting to have a resurgence. So what most people do in their office to screen patients for cardiovascular disease is the simple blood pressure, right? So can we trust traditional brachial blood pressure? One of my heroes is Mark Houston. I think a lot of you probably heard him speak. He speaks a lot in the functional medicine realm. And he's a clinical professor of medicine at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. And what he says is we can have terrible vascular health and have a normal blood pressure, which takes me to this incredible study called the CAFE study. They assumed in medicine that when they lower blood pressure here at the brachial artery, they're also lowering blood pressure at the aorta, where it really, really makes a difference and where it really counts. But that isn't the case. What they did is they measured the aorta, and it's 19,000 patients with hypertension. And they measured the brachial artery, like we normally do. And they put some of these folks on beta blockers. And the beta blockers, in some cases, lowered the blood pressure at the brachial artery. They did not touch the aorta. And so out of the study, they said that central aortic blood pressure may be more predictive of cardiovascular events, such as stroke and a heart attack, than traditional peripheral brachial blood pressure measurements. Really significant. Excuse me. So why measure the CAT? I just want to reiterate one more time because this is so important. Central aortic systolic pressure is the pressure at the root of the aorta or the largest artery in the body. The CASP is the strongest independent indicator of strokes, heart disease, and the survival rate more so than the brachial pressure measured with typical blood pressure measurements. So I wrote here, do you know your CAS? And it's real interesting because when I live in an active adult community, I go in the gym, I'm working out, and everybody's always going, well, what's your blood pressure and what's your cholesterol? And it takes a long time before science catches up. But they should be asking, do you know your CAS? They really should. And this is the Journal of Hypertension. It says hypertension is not a disease, but it's a marker for endothelial and vascular dysfunction. Endothelial dysfunction and microvascular smooth muscle dysfunction precede the development of hypertension by decades. And so we see here, we don't want to wait till we have clinical events. Even people come in and they say, well, I've ran my calcium score and I've done all these other things, ultrasound. But this technology is going to pick up problems way before those technologies show a problem, before clinical events. Even the development of atherosclerosis, we want to pick it up even earlier if we can. And so hypertension is a disease of blood vessels. Here's another big article. Hypertension is a vasculopathy characterized by endothelial dysfunction, structural remodeling, vascular inflammation, increased arterial stiffness, which we're going to pick up again on the angio scan, and reduced distensibility and loss of elasticity as seen on the angio scan. So what do we use to replace the dinosaurs? We still can use the blood pressure cuff, but we really want to use the angio scan. And this is the American Heart Association's scientific statement, recommendations for improving the standardizing, vascular research on arterial stiffness. And they talk a lot about what we're going to be talking about in a minute, called pulse wave velocity and arterial stiffness. And here's one more, contour analysis of the photoplasmographic pulse measured at the finger. That's what we're using, and they're comparing it to, there's another system that measures pulse wave velocity called tonometry. I have that in my clinic, and it was very expensive, and it's very tough to use, and you got to get the probe right on the radial artery, and you're futzing around with this thing. And so what they came up with the same conclusion, that it's a lot easier to use what we call digital volume pulse, which is our system. And here's what they say. Optical determination of DVP is a particularly simple method for performing pulse contour analysis. Like the pressure pulse, the DVP is influenced by large artery stiffness and by pressure wave reflection in the systemic vasculature, which we'll explain in a minute. Contour analysis of the DVP provides a rapid means of assessing vascular tone, arterial stiffness. Applications include the assessment of endothelial function, arterial stiffness, and characterization of arterial aging. So there we go. So this looks complex, but it really is very, very simple. During systole, when the heart contracts, it's going to send a pressure wave out. And it's going to go down. You can see the forward wave. The wave's going to travel down the artery to the bifurcation here at the femoral artery. And it's going to return back. And the speed at which it turns back is very significant. And when it comes back is very significant. And we're going to tell you what that is. So if the returning wave returns too fast in early systole, the heart has to work against itself. And the heart has less time to relax. This means the heart cannot get its own blood supply when it is contracting, and the result is more ischemia, heart attacks, and stroke. So it's during diastole, when the heart is at rest, when the heart is able to get its own blood supply. And when it's working overtime, when the heart's really stiff like this, it doesn't get, that's when we have problems, because it's working harder and longer, and it doesn't get its own blood supply. And it's working against itself. So again, the heart has to work harder. And it's going to reflect for us in a couple different ways. One of them is we're going to have a percentage on our test of this wave pattern called A, B, and C. And we alluded to that. So if they have 100% A, that means that the returning wave is traveling too fast. An A-type wave is typical for subjects older than 55 years of, or for younger persons with increased arterial stiffness and high tone of their vessels. And so, you know, a lot of times they'll say that the A is typical for a specific age. I don't care. I don't want to have a high percentage of A. I want that A to be as low as I can get it, and I want C to be the highest, and a little bit of maybe B. And that's going to reflect over, and also when we look at vascular stiffness. If somebody has vascular stiffness like over here, 24.3%, and you'll see it will tell you here that's not good. It's going to tell you that their vessels have lost their compliance and they're a little stiff. It also has a number here that compares that person to somebody their age. And in this case, this person's way over their age. So their vessels are starting to become stiff. They're probably going to be more of an APAC. If you see a negative number here, and that's on this vascular stiffness index, it's a negative number, that means that this artery is very compliant, very flexible, and most likely their central aortic systolic pressure we talked about is going to be within the range that it should be. Less pressure, systolic blood pressure in the central aorta here. Okay, so that's kind of what we're aiming for. So the angioscan measures pulse wave velocity that gives us a good indication of arterial stiffness and is a good indication of cardiovascular risk. With this analysis, we can see if exercise, diet, nutrition, and the nutritional products that we're going to be using are changing, are helping to improve vascular health. So the higher the pulse wave velocity the patient has, the shorter is the lifespan according to research. Speed does kill. So here we are. We have our test in front of us. The patient's sitting there, and they put their finger, their right hand, using the index finger, and we're measuring that. It tells us when the test is complete. It shows us their pulse wave pattern. It tells us about their pulse index. And this is just a way to make sure that you have an accurate reading. And it should be 1% or over here. And this should just be in the green zone. It's just easy to see that you have a nice details, conclude. It's really sweet and fast. And it shows you right here that in red, the heart rate's a little too high. If it's in white, it's kind of medium. If it was red here, it would be really bad, vascular stiffness. It shows you the pulse curve type. This person's 3% A.
Hey, Dr. Michael?
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you here for a second. Your mic is kind of coming in and out, so if you'll try to make sure to speak right into that microphone as you're presenting, because it's blinking in and out just a little bit.
Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm right in front of my screen. Okay.
Yep.
No problem. When we look here again, it's okay. It's not green, not too bad, because the colors will tell us. Then we have A at 30%.
Hey, Dr. Michael, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. Maybe you're too close now, because now it's even worse.
Okay, how about right now?
Yes. Okay, that sounded good.
Okay. So basically, this is the screen you're going to look at. Their vascular aging is going to tell you about that. It's going to tell you about their stress index. When you see it red, this person's highly stressed. And then you're going to measure something called oxygen saturation. And when we talk about oxygen saturation, it should be between 96 to 99% oxygen saturation. Okay? So here's vascular aging. And this person's 24. Their vessels look like they're 22. So that's fantastic. And it says good condition of arteries. It's kind of a no-brainer. Now, there's something you could measure if you want. It's the CAS. We can actually calculate out the CAS. So if you know what their vascular stiffness is, and we'll just round that to 25, it says 24.3, and this is not looking good. And it tells you that right here. And we can calculate the CAS by taking the systolic blood pressure and either add it to the vascular stiffness number or subtract it if it is a negative number. So this is a positive number. If it had a negative sign, that would be a negative number. And in this case, their blood pressure is 140/90, and the vascular stiffness is plus 25. So if you add the systolic to this number, you get 165. You can look over here for males what the average is and what minimum and maximum is. But the averages for males here, we'll have that up for you. And if it's over that, that's bad. That's really bad. They have too much. Their central aortic systolic pressure is way too high, and you may have to send them out. It's a serious situation. And so usually if you have a negative number here at the vascular stiffness, your central aortic systolic pressure is going to be pretty good. So we really, really need to know what's underneath the hood of our patients, and that's our angio scan. And so going a little further, you know, in the past, the old thinking was just a few risk factors were involved in damaging the vascular system and causing heart disease and stroke, and that was like diabetes, insulin resistance, obesity, hypertension, smoking, stress, poor diet, and exercise. But there's an infinite amount of insults that damage our vessels. First, biochemical. We can have heavy metals, we can have HCRP, we can have homocysteine, we can have nutritional deficiencies like vitamin K2, environmental toxins, infinite amount on this side. And then on the biomechanical side, you know, changes in hemodynamics where the blood is smacking into the side of our endothelium and damaging the vessel that way. And they all trigger what we call neoantigens. So they trigger something called toll-like receptors. They trigger something called PRR, pattern recognition receptors, nods, caveoli. All these have a finite response when those things are triggered. Inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune response, or dysfunction, really. And that leads to vascular disease, which leads to endothelial dysfunction, and vascular smooth muscle dysfunction as well. This is kind of the pathology, and this is kind of the causal factors. A lot of times we want to reduce inflammation, reduce oxidative stress, and then backtrack and go and handle the causal factors. Because all of us here are good at dealing with causal factors. That's what makes us special and different than anybody else. So how can we stay out of trouble? This is really interesting. So when I talked about the pattern recognition receptors on the vessel that trigger inflammation and oxidative stress, I found this in the literature. To inhibit or slow that down or tone that down, here it is. Turmeric, cinnamon, broccoli, resveratrol, green tea, celery, green pepper, rosemary, carrots, oregano, olives, quercetin, which, you know, tea, apples, onions, tomatoes. And I started to look up what was in the Optimal Fruit and Veggie Plus. Most of that is in there. That's pretty amazing to tone that down. You add that with a little Optimal Opti Nitric, and you have a pretty good program there. And so that takes us to here. So we have L-arginine, and we're going to get that from the Optimal Opti Nitric, and that's going to go to stimulate nitric oxide synthase, which is going to produce what we were looking for, nitric oxide. And that's not the end of the picture, because that triggers cyclic GMP, and that triggers the smooth muscle relaxation in the vessel, the vascular relaxation that increases the diameter and increases blood flow. But we have something that's really, really nasty called isometrical dimethyl arginine, and it blocks the nitric oxide synthase. And that's not a good thing, because then our blood pressure goes up, we lose our nitric oxide mechanism that controls blood pressure and helps us, right? And we have something else called dimethyl arginine dimethyl amino hydroxylase that breaks it down. It's a huge word. And that is so sensitive to oxidative stress, like oxidized LDLs, homocysteine, C-reactive protein. It's just a very sensitive molecule. So what can we do? Well, we want something to help with that, and that would be your Optimal Fruit and Veggie Plus. We need to quench those nasty. We want to quench and reduce the oxidation on that. And the Optimal Fruit and Veggie Plus works on the peroxide nitrate and the superoxide radicals, and also you want to up the arginine. So there's a way to deal with that as well. And again, we've got to protect the endothelium, and this is your blood flowing through the lumen, and here's the endothelial lining, and you can see it's kind of broken up. It's kind of apart. The gap junctions are broken, and things are going to leak through. And so LDL particles are going to leak through and they're going to get oxidized and become modified. They're not normal anymore into the intima. And now this monocyte comes in, becomes a macrophage. It starts eating all the debris in here, and over time it forms a foam cell. And the foam cell starts building up plaque, and all sorts of things happen. I'm not going to go into the full entourage of detail here. And eventually you get narrowing of the vessel, and eventually you can have rupture of the plaque. And we all know what happens there. We want to protect that endothelium, which takes me to this next one right here. The next area is, and how do we protect that? We protect that with nitric oxide. So we all know that Dr. Ignarro won the Nobel Prize for discovering the nitric oxide molecule. He says nitric oxide can prevent, even reverse heart disease and stroke. So we have a product to help us do that. So when we take that product, we should see changes on the angio scan, right? And we'll share that with you in a minute. So just to reiterate, what does this nitric oxide do? Why is it so good? Well, it keeps blood vessels pliable and elastic. It helps blood to circulate smoothly. It regulates platelet formation and prevents adhesion. It regulates oxidative enzymes in the cell, preventing oxidation. It reduces growth and multiplication of muscle cells that thicken the vessel wall. It slows plaque growth and suppresses atherosclerosis, and it may help control any arterial plaque that forms. And where else can we get nitric oxide? Well, you can eat a lot of kale and Swiss chard or arugula and on and on and on. And that's great. You should do that, but it's not enough. What we need to change those vessels is we need about 4 to 5 grams of arginine. And we also need about 200 micrograms of citrulline. We don't have to have as much because in the product, OHS product, it's highly absorbable. When we look at a full package, a full holistic approach, we got to add exercise into the picture. So it says here, what fits your schedule better, exercising 1 hour each day or being dead 24 hours each day? And this leads me to, we're going to be at the Brimhall Homecoming, and we're going to, hopefully we'll have the angio scan here. This is a technology, excuse me, the KATSU. And this is a technology, you can see this, it's like a blood pressure band causing partial occlusion, and it fools the brain into thinking that there's not enough oxygen, and the brain starts producing massive amounts of growth hormone and nitric oxide. And we'll go into the mechanism. And with this, it increases strength. You can use lighter loads when you exercise, shorter periods of time to get major gains. It's also for somebody who isn't an athlete, somebody who is sedentary, or somebody who has an injury. There's a whole program that's being used for this, and I thought it was fantastic to be used in a chiropractic office. This also increases, because of the nitric oxide, it does improve the angio scan scores as well. So here's KATSU. After I did a KATSU training, it actually, this wasn't typical for me, but I had 37% A, 58% B, and 5% C. I'm trying to get more C. I'm working on it. I'm working on it constantly. So I go, okay. My next question was, can I improve the angio scan scores after KATSU even more after taking nutraceutical products to increase nitric oxide? So look at this. This is KATSU training. I did that, and scores are pretty good. But after I took the optimal OptiNitric and the Fruit and Veggie Plus, the scores, I got into the negative range, which I've been trying to do for a long time. So that means that my arteries are more compliant, more flexible. I'm going to have less problems down the road as far as cardiovascular issues. Look at this. A went from 37 to 1%. The B dropped a little because most of it went to the C. This is like a young person. I want to be more C. My stress index is a little high. Most of us who are in practice or have a high stress index, that's a little too high. And my oxygen, you can hear me cough just a little bit, my oxygen saturation is a little too low. So here's another one. This person has a family history of cardiovascular disease, Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Their blood test shows LP little a, which is a very atherogenic lipid. and their pulse wave type is predominantly A. So we look over here. See the 100% A, not so good. And they're, excuse me. So what we want to do, and also their vascular stiffness is telling you here that it's too high. So the vessels are a little too stiff. So they tried taking a normal dose for a couple of days and did not change the readings. Also tested right after and at 30-minute increments for several hours afterwards. No change. Took a double dose the following day. No change noted. Took a double dose a second day and retested after 1 hour, showing changes starting in pulse wave type and vascular stiffness. So somebody has, you can see here that now they have a little bit more B in their pulse curve type and a little more C, and the vascular stiffness went from 32.1% to 14.5%, and they're a little better than somebody their age. They're improving. So somebody who has a little more damage to their endothelial lining, sometimes you have to double the dose, and that's why I want you to test your patients once a month, and then you can adjust the dosing. We added the beamer. Here's the beamer before and after. So the beamer is supposed to improve microcirculation. Went to Dr. Hatch's office, and he has a beamer, and I checked it out, and here it is. The vascular age is 79, and after doing some beamer, it went to 67 years old. So I think you should just stack. You know, you want to stack the diet, the nutrients, the exercise to get a better result. Here's something else. Because the angioscan is going to give you an indication about the stress response, then you know that's a whole other part of this whole holistic picture when we use the angioscan. And we know the effects of high cortisol, the DHEA, increased blood lipids, increased cholesterol triglycerides, increased fat accumulation, especially at the waist. And we know that fat produces tremendous inflammation through you know, because it's producing a lot of inflammatory cytokines, increases fluid retention, increases protein breakdown catabolism. So the bottom line of stress is increased allergies and lowered resistance to infections, yeast, viral, bacterial, poor glucose utilization, osteoporotic tendencies, hyperlipidemia, obesity, loss of lean muscle mass, and edema. So that's just a few items on the list, not to mention probably increased cardiovascular disease, and because it changes the parasympathetic nervous system, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So this number should not be over 150. So high stress index may be associated with high levels of social stress. We may change that on there, and cardiovascular disease. So these are the numbers that you'll see and what they mean. So less than 50 indicates possible arrhythmias or artifacts caused by movement of the patient. When you run the test, make sure they're not moving and talking. 50 to 150, stress levels correspond to normal levels. 500 to 900, high levels of stress may be associated with severe psycho-emotional stress, prolonged stress situations, and health issues dealing with cardiovascular issues. So if you have the heart rate variability or heart quest, you can kind of look at, we have those scores on there for the cortisol, DHEA, normal, maladaptive, or chronic stress. And you can kind of look at that. What we suggest is if you have the heart rate variability or whatever technique you want to use, but if you have the heart quest, we have that customized breathing program in there that's customized for that patient to bring them into that 1:6 ratio, 1 inhalation, exhalation for 6 heartbeats that will trigger and start to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system to start functioning more dominantly. And we know that the parasympathetic nervous system is cardioprotective, and we want that protection. And so when we look at this guy as chronic stress, easily triggered to the fight or flight side of the stress reaction. He told me, he says, yeah, I'm more on the fight side, you know, and he was taking some medications, but I don't think that was helping him. His heart rate variability, without going into depth here, all these percentages are very low. There's no wavy pattern here. It's low heart rate variability. And we get a little breathing program on him, and it brought it up just a little bit, and it reduced on the heart rate variability the stress index from 1,144 to 393, but there's not much parasympathetic nervous system function here, and we want to see more parasympathetic. And that takes us to the research, and this is looking at the power spectral analysis of heart rate in subjects over 100 from our heart rate variability system. And it's saying that what protects these centenarians, the reason they live so long and they have heart cardiovascular protection is this tone, this green here, that parasympathetic nervous system. So however you want to do it, when they're stressed like that, you want to bring up the parasympathetic nervous system function. And then we want to add in OptiAdrenal, which is a fantastic product from OHS. The other area that, when we talk about cardiovascular disease, we're going to really be talking about stroke and MI. You have to make sure the person has adequate methylation. So 35% of the population has a SNP or defect in the 677CT polymorphism of the 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme. And that's kind of a mouthful. But they need, if they have this, they can't process folic acid. And you need folic acid because that moves the methyl groups to where we want them. And it says here, I just don't have the strength to transfer all of those methyl groups. So we have methionine, and methionine goes to SAMe. SAMe gives up its methyl, the CH3 here, to do what? Repair our cells and repair our DNA. And we have about, according to Bruce Ames, the leading geneticist in the world, says that we have about 100,000 free radical hits a day, and we need this methylation to repair our DNA and our cells. Unfortunately, when it does that, it leaves something else. The humble SAMe becomes the evil homocysteine. And when SAMe gives up its methyl group to repair DNA or cells, it is transferred into one of the most toxic molecules in all of human physiology, homocysteine. And that blocks up our arteries. It knocks out the nitric oxide, by the way, and we get stroke and heart disease, right? Taming the homocysteine beats. Fortunately, homocysteine can be easily tamed nutritionally using vitamin B6, B9, B12, and magnesium. And there we go, methyl B. And we turn that homocysteine back around and it starts going to cysteine and some other areas in the cycle that we need. So it's very, very important. And I see people all the time who have histories of, everybody in my family had a heart attack. I'm probably going to have one. A lot of times they have high homocysteine or they have that SNP. You can either measure for the SNP, for that polymorphism, or you could run a homocysteine lab test, or you could just take the bottle of OptiMethyl B and muscle test, which is probably the easiest thing to do, and see if they need it.
Dr. Kessler?
Yes.
But back up there just 1 second, if you don't mind.
Back up? Sure.
Yeah, because I have formulated over 200 nutritional products. And when I was working with a company just previous to OHS, I would have to test 3 different products, and sometimes it would take 2 out of 3 to balance a person from muscle testing. Of course, we're checking all kinds of things. Insulin, we're checking homocysteine, and it's really hard to budge sometimes. Because when you raise, say, from a 10 homocysteine to 11 homocysteine, that isn't 1, that's exponentially higher. And since we have developed OptiMethyl B, remember, these products are whole food organic, and then they're put in the organic soup, and by doing that, they methylate organically. No other company in the world had that. Since I've been testing patients with OptiMethyl B, I get changes almost immediately in most patients. OptiMethyl B has trumped everything kinesiologically I've ever done, and post-blood tests, I'm getting the best results. So we literally have methylation taking place now the way it's done organically. So if you have a genetic SNP, which 50% of us do, as you've already mentioned, everybody needs OptiMethyl B. Well, everybody needs OptiNitric as well, because who couldn't improve the by OptiNitric, their nitric oxide? So we're on some very, very, very powerful things here with the OHS. It was traumatic for me to get working with them, but now the results is beyond anything I ever imagined. And it's the only company that has the patents to do this. So carry on. I just wanted to tie you into there.
No.
Every one of us on the planet should be taking OptiMethyl B every day, and probably OptiNitric, and probably fruits and veggies, and the adrenal and thyroid, because it's all organically methylated, and it facilitates the body in a natural way. Even the other companies that had products that were pre-methylated somewhat were done synthetically. This is the only product in the world that's done organically.
No, that's fantastic because these are products. This specifically, I've seen it. You can save lives, absolutely. So that takes me actually to the next step. I'd say big trouble in Little China when you get no positive changes on the Angio scan. So here it is. You have the patient on optimal fruit and veggie plus for at least 1 month with optimal Nitric, and you get no significant changes. So what does that tell you? You may need to increase the dose. So you got a great measurement. You got the Angio scan, and you can tell that. And you can also, a lot of times before I give anybody something, I'm a big muscle tester. I'll muscle test them to make sure that's exactly what they need. Maybe they have high homocysteine. Again, Dr. Brimble told you about this product, and you should test it right away. You should test that on everybody, so that just makes it easy. Here's another bad one. Maybe they have an Lp(a), the atherogenic lipoprotein. You may need to test them for high niacin, and I'm not sure if we have a product yet for that, but that may be something we may need because that's fixed usually by high-level niacin. You need to check the diet and healthy fats. So we have the optimal EFA, and we already know the association of EFAs in relationship to cardiovascular prevention. We have the Beamer and the Katsu to improve vascular health. And, I told you there's an infinite number of insults that damage the endothelium. And so we need something for the environment. We have Opti Environment Detox, and we have Opti Metals Detox. And so you have to, it's back to the drawing board. We need to cover and protect all the avenues that are affecting our patient, and that's what we're all good at. The other thing is our levels, vitamin D in youth, a cardiovascular risk factor. And they took these kids from 3 years old to 18 years old, measured their vitamin D and tracked them up to the age 30 to 45 years old. And they found when they were young and they had low vitamin D levels, they ended up with more carotid intermedial thickness, which is really bad and leads to major strokes and heart attacks later on in life. So this is really interesting. Reducing the risk, 17 daggers of arterial disease. I'm not going to go over all of them, but if we look here, elevated C-reactive protein, insulin, excess insulin or insulin resistance really, or high glucose or nitric oxide deficiency, whatever you see on this side, you're going to pick that up because it's going to affect the angioscan readings right away as far as vascular stiffness, and you're going to see that. Also, again on this dagger list, we have the excess homocysteine. But one of the things right now I want to show you is low vitamin K2. So this product, I'm going to add that into my arsenal right now, and it's going to be real interesting how it's going to affect the angioscan readings, having the longevity DK2 with the ubiquinol and the vitamin K2 in the right form. So I looked it up, and when we talk about NK, it shows 50% reduction in arterial calcification, 50% reduction in cardiovascular risk, 25% in all-case mortality. I looked it up. It says vitamin D and vitamin K2 show the progression of arterial calcification, slow the progression of arterial calcification. The study was designed to compare the effect of oral administration of vitamin K2 and the MK7 plus vitamin D, or just vitamin D alone, on the progression of coronary artery calcification score and carotid intermedial thickness, the lining of the main arteries in your neck that feed blood to your brain, which are hallmarks of potentially lethal heart disease and stroke. So the data revealed a slower progression of calcification in those taking both vitamin K2 and vitamin D compared to those taking vitamin D alone. The study's lead author said, in this study, the K2 and D protected against cardiovascular calcification, while the D group alone did not. Clearly, this has positive implications for human health, and that's why you have both in this product, because you need them both to produce this matrix GLA protein that pulls calcium out of your arteries, puts it back into the bones, and pulls it out of the valves where it doesn't belong and protects you. So that's pretty cool. I think that's just a fantastic combination. And the other thing that is really, really important in the full program has to do with metabolic cardiology. any form of heart disease, bypass surgery, heart attack, high blood pressure, any sick heart is losing ATP energy over time. Problems result when we can't make enough ATP fast enough to refill the tank. The heart doesn't have enough fuel to function properly. We need the proper building blocks to make ATP. The heart needs ATP to go through the complete cycle of contraction, systole and relaxation, diastole. ATP has to do with repair and rejuvenation of heart cells and consequently the heart muscle. You need ATP to get nutrients into the cell to get the toxins out of the cell. So how do we do that? Well, we have it. We have the CoQ10 in the ubiquinol form, perfect for doing what we just said. A sick heart is leaking out energy. Congestive heart failure is an energy-starved heart. So we have everything in that longevity DK2. I mean, it's just a great product, and I think that when I add that in, I'm going to have even greater and faster results with the AngioScan. So preparation for AngioScan. Tests should be done preferably at the same time. I don't always do it at the same time. I can't do that in my practice. But, you know, if you could, that would be great. You want to avoid alcohol, smoking, caffeine, and other stimulants the day of the evaluation. Intense physical exercise should be avoided 2 hours before testing with the AngioScan. Preferably if they don't do intense exercise the day before, that's even better. Immediately before testing, it would be a good idea to have the patient relax in a comfortable, quiet area. That's not always possible either, but you know, those are just optimal situations. Preparation for AngioScan. Testing can be done either supine or in a seated position. When you start a test in a particular position, all subsequent tests should be in the same position. The patient's hand should be at heart level. I prefer to just have them sitting, put a towel under their, right where you see that here, and just have the device hanging over just like this, like you see in the picture. The device doesn't touch the ground, doesn't touch, excuse me, the table. And I always test the right index finger. And that's important because, and I'll tell you in just a sec, a lot of times people come in with cold hands. You already know they have poor circulation or a thyroid situation going on. And you got to warm their hands to get a good reading. Sometimes they'll have, you can put your hands over the hydroculator, under hot water. You can have these little things that warm up the hands. I have a little lamp that they can put their hands under, an infrared lamp, and nail polish. Tell them, prepare them to remove their nail polish. And it's just the one index finger on the right hand. Regular heartbeats can throw it off, and they need to come in. You know, a lot of patients are dehydrated. Make sure they're hydrated, and they eat a little something so they don't have hypoglycemia, and the brain gets starved, and it goes into an emergency situation, and it affects the vascularity and the hands. Okay, so make sure that they have a little something to eat. And the recommendations for a full-blown program for improving endothelial function. So you got the Beamer. Later on, we may talk about this and further webinars. Katsu, optimal OptiNitric, and optimal Fruit and Veggie Plus. And now we're going to add in the longevity DK2, which is really, really important, and the OptiMethyl B. So you got a complete program, a complete cardiovascular program to prevent cardiovascular incidents. And so the AngioScan, healthy aging requires healthy arteries and a healthy heart. AngioScan provides early detection of vascular changes before major symptoms of health issues such as strokes and cardiovascular disease occur. So it's life-saving information, improves patient compliance because, you know, they see it. They actually see it and they want to know what to do. What do I need to do next, doc, when they see that their arteries aren't looking so good? Ease of use only takes 5 minutes. It's portable, downloads to the iPhone or Android, prints reports for the patient. So to purchase this, it's $1,500. I mean, it's a no-brainer, really, and you need to have this in your practice. And you can go to www.hrvhq.com/Brimhall, and I have it here as well. This is just an ending one. You can see it here, where to order. And on that site, we have movies that go over the AngioScan. We have also what we just made was the quick start guide, and it's a video. And we're going to put some of the other resources on there, so you'll have like flyers for your patient and all that good stuff. Well, Mrs. Jones, your AngioScan is showing that your vascular age is 67, and your actual age is 62. Doctor, what can I do? We have some wonderful, natural, and highly researched solutions that have been shown to improve your vascular age to help you prevent cardiovascular issues. We will put you on optimal optic nitric, optimal fruit and veggie plus, and longevity D with K2, and we would recheck the angio scan in a month. Thank you, doctor, for taking such good care of me. That's the point. You know, you're going to be able, like I said, you're going to be able to save lives because you do not know what is under the hood of that patient. And it's going to pick up problems way before they have an episode or a problem. And so go ahead and we'll open it up for some questions at this point.
Oh, waiting for questions to come in. In reality, if you couldn't do all that different stuff to prepare people, and a lot of times you can't, it still gives you a pretty good overview. I can see we need to take the nail polish off, we need to take away synthetic nails and things like that. But when a hand's a real cold like that, that you said it already shows that they have low vascularity. So if you get a reading, it's not like it's wrong, it's not quite as accurate. So if let's say the average time it takes you to evaluate a patient and get a reading is about 5 minutes, correct?
That's right.
And then what would you recommend? Do you test every patient as part of their initial examination, put them on the program, and then in a 30-day re-exam, you could do that retest of whether people are doing the peripheral neuropathy course or whether they're monitoring their vascularity or see how much work the beamer is accomplishing, if the nutrition's working. It looks like we have a gold mine here for compliance for patients.
Yeah, it's really, the compliance is very easy because they can see where they're at. You know, seeing is believing. So they want to improve their vessels. That's something that they have fear about. Is, you know, everybody has a little bit of fear about stroke and heart disease, and you're able to show them, and it just motivates them. So it's really easy to put them on a program, and it's also easy to see how all the other programs are working. So if they're on the program with the Beamer, you got them on other programs that are going to improve cardiovascular and vessel health, then you have a technology to do that. So it fits into all the programs, really, John, that you're doing at this time.
Absolutely. Phenomenal. Now, Clark, has anybody written in any questions? He's usually one that interprets it, fires it back to us.
Okay. And, you know, I'm not sure that, you know, if anybody has questions later on, they can contact me, and I'll be happy to answer them. Again, I advise you, if this was intriguing for you, to go to www.hrvh2.com/Brimhall and take a look at that site. We'll be adding to that site all the time new information for you. But this is really, again, it's just a no-brainer. It's very inexpensive, and you'll be able to screen all your patients. I screen my patients on this once a month without failure, and make adjustments as needed, and then keep them on a maintenance program.
So we'll be able to check anybody at homecoming that wants to be tested themselves if they don't have one already, correct?
That's right. We're going to have 2 kiosks, so they're able to actually touch the screen, and they'll put in their height and weight and age, and they'll put their hand in the device, and it will read for them right there on the spot.
There's some questions coming in. What effect do heart blood pressure medications have on the test?
Well, that's the point. The point is that you can test to see if they're working or not. So I have people who come in and they're on a particular medication. Is it really effective or not? Right? So that's fantastic. You can do that.
Can I use it in just...
Job Dot, do you have any... Job Dot, are you there? Dr. Karamoff?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah, Job Dot, do you have... You know, they were asking about medications, and I think you could use it to track medications. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like if a medication is working okay, so they can see the changes on the blood pressure and on the vascular aging. The majority, the chemical blood pressure medication, they will just affecting some part of the problem, but it's not well affecting the vascular aging. So basically it's lowering the main blood pressure, but the vascular aging, so it's still the same. So that's why so they need a different approach to change the vascular aging and the vascular stiffness.
Thank you.
One of the doctors is asking, what do you typically charge for this service?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I usually put in my initial visit and then follow-up visit, so basically it's including on my visit. But we heard from the other doctors, so they charging from like $50 and up to depending where they're practicing and what kind of like practice they're doing.
I charge $100.
Yeah, perfectly. I mean, like it's the information what is showing up, it's worth more than $100.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Because absolutely.
I think the real key is people are going to know they're going to want to see if what we're recommending works. So they're going to take the nutrition to test it out. Then when it raises, they're going to say, "Wow, that really did a good job." Or if it doesn't come up, like you mentioned earlier, in the short period of time, they say, "Okay, you've got to double it. You need more. You have genetic SNPs. You have something not allowing your digestion to work better. So maybe we increase the enzymes, the probiotics, the adrenal, the thyroid, and then we check it. And then 30 days later, my gosh, it's got 50% better. Then that patient can see this is what it takes." And another issue is people get sloppy. They quit doing what they did to get them in good shape. We can retest them. If it goes back again, you say, "You're cheating. Is that what you want? You want 67-year-old or 57-year-old blood vessel?"
Right. Exactly.
Here's another question. Now, keep in mind as I ask this question, I'm a business guy here. So, will this pick up erythemas caused by possible hormone imbalance?
I'm sorry.
Arythmias.
Okay. Well, you want arrhythmias. You really, you really want the HeartQuest. The HeartQuest, you'll see the arrhythmias on the HeartQuest, our heart rate variability technology.
That'll also be available at homecoming too.
Yeah, we'll have the heart rate. We'll be testing everybody on the HeartQuest as well at the homecoming. If you really, look, I sit at my desk. Patient comes in. I first test them on the heart rate variability HeartQuest so I can look at their total system and how they're able to respond to stress, how their nervous system is working, how they're and those who know the HeartQuest, it's looking at a lot of the regulatory system, the central nervous system. It's looking at the brain, the neurotransmitters, inflammation, the thyroid. So I get a broad picture looking at the HeartQuest. Then they move to the then I in the same and then I just on the same table I have the Angio scan. Then they turn and they stick their finger in the Angio scan. 5 minutes I know what's going on with their vessels. Then if I want to just quickly go through their system very fast, you know how fast muscle testing is, where I stick them on my little device, the Syra, and scan them real quick. I mean, I do everything, and it's very quick, and I kind of have a whole feel of what's going on with their system right there. I have my lab work right there. If I want to hand them a sheet, I say, I want you to go to the lab, and everything's very organized. I don't move. I don't waste a lot of energy.
Here's another question. How does the angioscan compare with cardio wave analyzer, if you know?
Jagdat, do you know the cardio wave analyzer?
I don't know, but I know like it's a few systems on the market. So some of them is measuring through the blood pressure cuff, which is kind of like measuring on the brachial arteries. And the results, so they will showing up how this waveform, which is kind of like, changing the air inside the blood pressure, how they will affecting. So it's kind of like the same what with the measuring the regular blood pressure, but the computer will kind of like a little bit analyze this changing on the pressure inside the cuff, and then so they will figuring out what's this one. So we are utilizing actually it's the pulse wave. So if you're familiar with a pulse wave, so they have like a double kind of like a hump. So we have a dichrotic notch, and so this why so it's more precisely showing up how the blood is traveling through the artery and then returning back. So this is technology which much advanced than the blood pressure cuff measurement or the temperature measurement. So we have equipment which is kind of like measuring the temperature changing on the fingers. But this one, we can measure how the blood is traveling through the big artery, small artery, and when they return, so how they will affect the preload and afterload, especially afterload for the heart. So that's why, so we're using the plethysmographic. So we're analyzing the pulse wave.
And another thing, like I said before, I have a few of these different systems, and I spent, I don't know, $7,000–8,000 on my tonometry device that was supposed to be this fantastic device that was a pain in you know what to get a reading and get it right on the radial artery. And this is much easier to use, and this one has a printout. The patient can see the screens and see what's really going on. The other one, it would print out a little strip for $7,000. You know.
Can the angio scan be used with the HRV from CLA?
So the Angio scan is a separate equipment, so you can combine two research staff from the HRV system, and then so the Angio scan will analyze. The HRV system is using majority HRV, so they're using electrocardio signals. Some of them, which is more a simple one, they're using plethysmographic. But the Angio scan, so we're analyzing the specific changes on the pulse wave, which is A, B, and C. So it's a different category of the people with a different age. So we can see how they will complying with this age. If it's more younger people, so it can be supposed to be more C wave. It's a middle age, it's a B wave, and older, so people with A wave. And so the the heart rate variability, for example, so we have HeartQuest, which is kind of like recording electrocardiogram. So it's electrical impulses coming from the heart, and we can record and see what's going on. And for the angioscan, so we can see the changes on the arteries. I mean, like cholesterol is very important, but we don't know how they will build up in arteries. This system, so you can see how the patient will, even they have maybe not a big high level of the cholesterol, but their vascular aging, vascular stiffness is increased, and this why so they need maybe different the treatment plan.
Have you seen improvements in AFib when treating with the protocol applicable to the angioscan results?
So the AFib, so basically it's showing up, so some kind of like, well, the upper part of the atrial, or it's an atrial fibrillation. So the AFib, so basically showing up, it's not good supply, so the blood supply to the myocardium. And with increasing the blood supply to the myocardium, and usually the heart will receive this blood supply during the diastole. And if we will decrease the CASP during the diastole, so the heart afterload, we decrease the heart afterload, and this so we can increase the blood supply into the heart.
I think that's a great place to stop. We're about 10 minutes overtime, Dr. Michael, so you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we've pretty much, when we look at this, it's a complete, really, it's kind of a complete, like I said at the beginning, it's a complete turnkey system using the angioscan with the forms that we've created, with the fantastic products from Optimal Health Systems, and it's a no-brainer. And I can't see not running this test on every patient that walks in your door. You know, again, I can't emphasize that nobody else is doing this kind of screening. You know, and you're going to save lives. So I think that it's just a vital component to your practice.